It was obvious from the very outset, you know, with the script and the way it was and how many sets there were, that it was going to be important to have someone who could give you great design and build great sets in a very short amount of time. The film got going really quickly. We were going to have a very short pre-production period. Owen did like an amazing job, as he did like on the Matrix films.
There's about 89 set areas that we have, or location areas that we have in the film. Some of them have 4 or 5 parts to them. It's a lot of things you've either got to find or build. And we've had a very limited amount of pre-production.
When we first started, you know, the first thing that happened was we were sort of trailing through Europe looking for a place to make the film, I guess, you know. It became apparent really quickly that we couldn't shoot in London, you know, because there wasn't enough time, not enough stage space. So we started on a tour of Europe.
Berlin just happened. We went from Budapest to Prague to Berlin, and as it turned out, the studios were suddenly available and all of their workforce were available.
All the interiors for the film are being shot here in Babelsberg Studios in Berlin. And the challenge for us really is to build, you know, English, London sort of interiors, and we've shot a little on location in Germany, finding German locations, Berlin locations that convincingly match for London.
Well, it's been really great to be in Berlin. The studio's amazing, and obviously there's like a great film history here. And a not so great film history here, because, you know, these where a lot of Hitler's propaganda films were made as well. It's also an interesting place to make a movie like this because they've experienced so many different oppressive regimes in this city. It's heavy with history here, so it gives so much sort of weight to what we're doing. You could make a version of this film in England, which would be a great way of doing it. But we weren't going to make that sort of film. We were going to make a more manufactured version, I guess.
You would start eventually to see. Well, you'd start, but see, it's quite a ways back before the fence.
We have gone away from certain things which were design styles, if you like, of the graphic novel, which work as a piece of art. But in this instance, I think we have tried to take a measure of London. When people look at it and say, wow, I can see this London, I can recognise it. I think James wanted a sense of earthiness that London has, a grittiness, a sense of London that is very recognisable, as London is today, or as it would have been even 20 years ago, but also a London that you feel a lot would be around in another 20 years' time, particularly in a world that's been kind of frozen by England becoming a totalitarian state.
You don't really know where you are in terms of time. It's as though sort of creativity is almost stopped in a way. So a lot of the interiors, a lot of the dressing is very much today, or even slightly retro in a way. James always sort of pulled back from doing a sort of futuristic look.
We used a lot of greys and grey tones, and all the furniture kind of blended into one sort of particular tone. Plenty of things to have, but they're primarily all the same. And it just made it slightly more regimented. And then adding our sort of our Big Brother look with maybe some telegraph poles with speakers on and cameras everywhere and that sort of thing.
We've gone for very, very real kind of finishes and textures, and you know, the colours are very kind of muted. We've paid particular attention to the aging and the kind of the grain and this kind of visceral texture of the film.
Whether it was like people's homes or that, it was, you know, like the feeling of London, if you like. You know, we had a lot of English crews, so that always kept us very, you know, honest as to, you know, what was truly London or what was truly, you know, English-centric, I suppose.
It looks a lot like our world, but in their production design, Owen was able to give it a feel that was a little off. It is definitely the future of our world.
It's been a fascinating film as far as dressing is concerned because there's been so much of it. Every set has been in its own little complex way, but obviously the biggest one has got to be the Shadow Gallery where V lives.
I remember sitting down and saying to Owen, you know, like it'd be great, you know, if in some ways this was like an expanded Ace of Clubs, if you like, and, you know, there'd always be like a central piece and then there'd be V's dressing room or V's kitchen or V's reading room. If it could all sort of spiral out from the middle.
It's a cross between a crypt and an undercroft. And I see it as, it's the sort of thing that would be almost below St Paul's or underneath Westminster Cathedral or underneath the Old Bailey itself or underneath the law courts in London. It's a kind of Tudor arched space that you could almost imagine 30 years ago they bricked up a door and they forgot it was there.
I thought it should be very dark and with patches of light. Never thought I'd like him to live in sort of perpetual kind of 24-hour light, you know, that he should sort of make a day and a night for himself, and I would do that through the lighting.
He has this eclectic mix of fantastic art that, you know, he's taken and is caretaking, as he says, in his sort of labyrinth of galleries, and we've had to get everything from, you know, Picasso's to Turner's to modern art, comics, toys, all sorts of things, all sorts of really interesting and sort of, you know, great paraphernalia of stuff.
That room is filled with books that were banned by the government, which is hilarious because I don't know where they got the books from, but a lot of them are like, you know, like Jackie Collins or like Posh Spice Tell-All or whatever. So they're not exactly books you'd consider the government opposing so much.
James described it that, you know, V would collect some books and he would put them in this room, and then he'd collect a few more and put them in and put them in and keep putting them in and keep putting them in. And so at the far end, it's almost like a snowdrift of books that come up. The hardest thing really is the sort of logistics of then shooting something like that. So you can't just all pile books up because James will say, right, well, let's have that wall taken away. So it would take too long then to take the wall away and then take all the books away piece by piece. So many of them are stuck and screwed together, so they're almost like building blocks.
I suspect there are a number of people in this world of V for Vendetta who are like him, who have their own hoards, their own treasure troves, and the Shadow Gallery is very much a treasure trove.
James brought in a cutout from the newspaper of an old library they had found in Iraq. It looked exactly like the set, just, you know, piles and piles and piles of books that the government had like shut down this library, and it was just sort of incredible having real life parallel.